Hello everyone, this is Marina Hritzishina, and I want to welcome you to the first podcast Clean Energy Talks. Today we are going to talk about energy tracking with Katrien Verwimp. Katrien is the founder of Enunda, a center of expertise in energy origin tracking, and a strategy coordinator for the European Energy Certificate System in the Association of Issuing Bodies. Thank you, Katrien, for participating in this podcast and for willingness to discuss the questions about energy tracking. So the term tracking of energy is used in different ways, from collecting data to energy transition questions. What does tracking of energy means, and what is the purpose of energy tracking in your opinion?
Yes, a very good question. And by the way, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's an honor to be in this conversation. Energy origin tracking is about informing consumers about the origin of the energy that they consume. And generally, originally that comes from informing them about the energy sources and to help them make a choice on the source of the energy that they consume. And this way, consumers can be empowered to support the energy transition by the choices that they make, because they can organize a pool for energy production of a certain source. So it provides a link between energy production of renewable and low carbon energy sources towards the consumption of these sources that as a market mechanism can reduce the need for subsidies and in general help moving the energy transition. Now, over time, we saw in the electricity energy origin tracking framework, which has been organized with the guarantees of origin, the importance to clarify the purposes of energy origin tracking, because the purpose of the guarantees of origin being what we call disclosure, informing consumers of the origin of their energy. We saw a dynamic to need to clarify that this purpose of disclosure could be seen as a different purpose than what governments use for their accounting towards policy targets and for what governments use to organize financial support mechanisms. And we observe over time in the electricity sector that there have been growing several or different accounting mechanisms for disclosure, for target accounting, and for support. And these three need to be acknowledged. We see also in the electricity sector 20 years ago, there have been made choices to do this really in a distinct way, to account policy targets based on statistics and agreements between governments, do support mechanisms separate from the guarantee of origin system, and then have the guarantee of origin to inform consumers of the origin of the energy that they consume. We saw that dynamic with electricity, yet we see now also more and more interest of bringing the purposes back together in a single multi-purpose tracking framework, especially with gas origin tracking, renewable gases, hydrogen origin tracking. This becomes also a pull from the European Commission outwards to make sure that what is accounted for target in a certain country also ends up being disclosed in that country. So this makes sense. And we see this dynamic also more and more in the electricity sector to keep the origin of the energy accounted for target where it's actually disclosed towards the consumer. So that's a general framework that we seem to be operating in, an evolution of the narrative to do consistent organization of energy origin tracking for all purposes in the same setting somehow.
So it's quite important. It's interesting that you mentioned a lot about guarantees of origin, but at the same time for renewable hydrogen, we use a lot of certificates. And if we consider these both options for the tracking of energy, how guarantees of origin and certificates interact in the current EU certification schemes? I still do not understand the full interaction.
Yeah. Exactly. So these certification schemes, they are helping the certification of compliance with criteria towards target accounting. So the target accounting frameworks, especially in the renewable transport fuel targets, they have included criteria that have to be filled except the renewable source. It's not just the renewable source of the energy that makes it compliant to the criteria. It needs to comply with, for hydrogen, additionality criteria, temporal geographical matching criteria. And so criteria compliance comes on top of the tracking. So there's one thing of tracking the origin, which is actually conveying information from one point to another point and make sure that this information is not double counted anywhere, and add to that tracking framework compliance criteria confirmation. So that is what we see happening, and there is a bit of risk if there are the confirmation of criteria compliance is traded separately from the guarantee of origin, that there comes duplication of the same information. And that needs to be prevented, because double counting is actually what undermines the whole framework and what undermines the credibility of energy origin tracking in general. So that's why the instrument of the guarantee of origin has been created, to prevent double counting, to ensure a unique claim. A guarantee of origin is issued by a uniquely appointed, governmentally appointed issuing body, and there's only one registry in every domain that registers a guarantee of origin on the account of a producer, and from there onwards it can be traded or transferred to the account of the next owner and at the account of a consumer. And this framework ensures the uniqueness of the information. You can see a guarantee of origin as a vehicle that conveys information, and the question is what information to convey from point A to point B. And one of these pieces of information can be compliance with criteria. And our FMBO criteria compliance can be such information that can be conveyed on guarantees of origin. But we see also that legislation doesn't always, at least at EU level, doesn't require to include that. So we see some member states include that information already, and some are not yet doing that.
Yes, it's quite difficult, as you mentioned, and how to exclude double counting, especially take into account that we also should use different approach, mass balance and book and claim for guarantees of origin. So it's quite difficult and challenging still to combine both systems and different targets. That's correct.
That is where the Union database has an intention. So the European Commission has created a Union database, which is not yet in use for hydrogen, but it's intended to be used for hydrogen also in the future. And that's where the intention is to make the link between the guarantees of origin and the certification certificates, or the criteria compliance certificates, so that they are at least brought together, and that target accounting and disclosure is indeed brought together in the same place.
So maybe when Union database will be implemented, we will be able to see this link directly in our project. In our previous short discussion, we mentioned about standards. And it was very interesting for me to know more about the impact of standards on certification, because usually we talk about guarantees of origin certificates without standardization. Could you share your insights about this topic?
Thanks. I think the past 20 years have brought me every time again to the importance of standardization. It's very nice to have an energy origin tracking system that works in one place, but it's much nicer if that works in multiple places at the same time. And it's just like using the same coin in multiple places. It's just easier to have the same, or the information structured in the same way in multiple places. That helps governments to understand each other's system for energy origin tracking, if it's a standardized origin tracking system. It helps traders and corporates to understand the system in multiple countries where they operate in one place. So that is also the reason why AIB has created a standard for guarantees of origin, which is already operational for 20 years. On a voluntary basis, governmental organizations cooperate and build together a standard, the EEC standard, the European Energy Certificate System. And they co-created it, they maintain it together, and they constantly further evolve it together. That is in Europe, the practical standard, and EU legislation now enforces the SEN standard on guarantees of origin. which is existing actually already since 2013. There is a EN 16325 standard for guarantees of origin. It's under revision to extend it from electricity guarantees of origin to gases, hydrogen, and heating and cooling. And that standard, once its revision is voted, will be enforced upon the member states in Europe, and very much extends what is in the X standard to ensure harmonization, at least within Europe. But besides that, I also think standardization across the world is important. And because especially copper wires for electricity, they are limited to continents at least, but the hydrogen value chains are global value chains, and they really need some global joint understanding of the same thing. Even if national criteria may be different, the same understanding of how to convey information from one point to another point really is a helpful thing. And I also recognize that it's not easy for one country's legislation to enforce its viewpoint on another country's legislation. And that's where standards really can be helpful. ISO standards are global standards, and it's also possible for legislations in different continents to refer to ISO standards, for example. And that's why I would encourage to extend standards like the Guarantee of Origin standard in CEN towards the global level, or similar standards, and really see what it needs around the globe to come to an acceptable level of standardization of the instrument to convey that information from point A to point B.
Okay, thank you. Now I understand better the role of standards in certification. You mentioned also about international trading, and for EU market, we expect a lot of import also. According to Repower EU plan, 50% of hydrogen should be imported from third countries. And it's interesting to understand what shall importers of hydrogen take into account when considering guarantees of origin.
Yeah, well, it depends from which country they import their hydrogen and to where they import, but I assume you mean import into Europe?
Into Europe, yes.
Well, if there are guarantees of origin in the country of origin, then it is important that, that if it's electricity, that if it are guarantees of origin for electricity, that these guarantees of origin get cancelled or retired, as they would call it in the US, or redeemed in the IREC framework. Then these guarantees of origins need to be validated in accordance with the energy consumption. So if the hydrogen is created outside of Europe, and there exists an energy origin tracking system, energy attribute certificate, then this energy attribute certificate needs to be cancelled, removed, retired, redeemed, to ensure that the electricity with which the hydrogen is created is not yet counted elsewhere as renewable. That's the main importance, to prevent double counting, not only of the hydrogen, renewable hydrogen that gets imported, but also not double count the renewable electricity with which that hydrogen is created.
And of course, maybe we need some agreements with third countries for recognition of this guarantees of origin.
Yeah. So indeed, if the hydrogen, if the electricity guarantee of origin gets cancelled, and if there is a new guarantee of origin created after the conversion of electricity to hydrogen, and you can issue a hydrogen geo in that country. That guarantee of origin, well, there are then requirements in the European Union to have mutual recognition with the European Commission for importing it. Currently, we don't have yet such treaties where the European Commission has gone into that mutual recognition. We understand that there are good discussions ongoing with the contracting parties of the energy community to establish such agreement. I think it's probably not happening overnight, but it's on a good road. And once that happens, import of the hydrogen guarantees of origin into EU can also happen. And they can go together with criteria compliance on voluntary schemes.
I know, for instance, Ukraine has some initiatives connected with guarantees of origin, and for development of this topic, it's important to have some agreements. So for this reason, I think that it's a very important topic for import in the future.
Yeah, and also I think it may be not so easy. So even outside the energy community, I think it may be even not so easy for the European Commission to recognize any other guarantee of origin system in the world for electricity if there's no copper wire, because there's also a requirement of having a physical import. But hydrogen has global supply chains, and personally, I would recommend the European Commission to look into the option to have that recognition for specifically hydrogen or biomethane, things that get entered by ship, so that the guarantees of origin for renewable gases and hydrogen can be recognized if they come from a country with good guarantees of origin. It doesn't have double counting.
Yeah, it's very important to have such solutions for import of hydrogen with different options, not only through pipeline, but also ship and others. Except renewable hydrogen, we now have a lot of discussions about low carbon hydrogen in connection with the draft of the delegated act about low carbon fuels. But we do not have clear picture about rules for guarantees of origin. We just have some mention in the regulations that it should be also be subject to guarantees of origin for low carbon hydrogen. Do you have some information about guarantees of origin for such type of hydrogen?
Yes, it's a good question. It's doesn't have a clear answer yet. The requirements for low carbon gases and low carbon hydrogen are only just being refined. But we have discussions in the Association of Issuing Bodies to clarify on gas guarantees of origin with a tag that could indicate whether it complies with the criteria of low carbon gas or hydrogen. So guarantees of origin, they are by design not necessarily limited to renewable energy sources. They can be issued for fossil energy sources, and you can add a tag on them that they comply with certain criteria, for example, the RFMBO criteria or the low carbon gas criteria. And that enables to convey the information. But it's not mandatory for member states to implement guarantees of origin for non-renewable sources. And it's not yet certain that all member states will do that implementation.
I think it's misperception of this rules because we can find the rules for guarantees of origin in Renewable Energy Directive. For this reason, we expect that only for renewable energy we can issue guarantees of origin. But now you changed my opinion about this. So it's quite interesting. And the last question, could you give several pieces of advice for people who work with guarantees of origin and certificates in the energy sector?
My general advice is always to all parties in every place, wherever you operate in this energy origin tracking ecosystem, help preventing double counting. That is true for governmental implementers, that is true for economic operators, for producers, for traders, for consumers. Make sure you use a system that is ensuring you of a unique claim. If you make a claim on renewable energy consumption, make sure you use the system that is ensuring that unique claim. If there is a guarantee of origin in your country, you can only make a renewable energy consumption claim based on that guarantee of origin, unless your government provides a different framework for that. Preventing double counting is essential because if you just claim renewable energy consumption through another mechanism, or through whatever other logic than the one that provides a unique claim, you undermine the guarantee of origin system, the energy attribute certificate system in your country. And you don't only undermine that system, but you also undermine your own credibility. So it's not helping nobody to have double counting. Everybody needs to prevent a scandal that would overhaul the whole sector. And everybody benefits from trustworthy instrument for energy origin tracking. And I've not seen anything that really can prevent double claims better than an energy attribute certificate like the guarantee of origin.
Thanks a lot for this insights and for discussion so important topics about energy tracking. Thank you.
Thank you very much as well. I think you do a great job in informing the energy sector. So welcome to continue doing so, and let's be in touch.
Thank you.